Borodal, welcome to today's DHCW Programmes Delivery Committee. In relation to today's proceedings, I'd like to make a couple of notes. Firstly, committee members won't always be looking at the camera. We do have a large number of papers that we've been going through, and we will be referring to those at times during the meeting. We're scheduled to take a 15-minute break after agenda item number 4 and looking to conclude today's proceedings at 1 o'clock. I won't do introductions up front, but what I would do is ask participants when they speak first to just introduce themselves. That way we'll be a little bit more efficient with time. And we'll now move on to the formal agenda with apologies for absence. We've just got the one, which is Sam Hall, our Director of Primary Care, but we're in safe hands with Margot, who's Deputy Director, who's going to stand in for Sam today. So welcome, Margot. I haven't got any further apologies for absence. Oh, Sam. I've got two. Sorry, Chris first.
Sorry, David. Yeah, I should have said Ruth Glassard, I think, is just going to run a bit late joining. She will be on shortly.
Okay, thanks. Sam?
David, I need to leave at 12:30, I'm afraid, because I've got to go and chair another call, which I couldn't arrange for another time. So apologies, I have to leave a bit earlier.
Okay, no problem. I did get a heads up from Belinda on that topic, so I was aware you had a bit of a clash later on. Okay, thanks for that, both of you. Okay, can I now move on to conflicts of interest? I haven't been notified in advance of anything. Could I just check, has anybody got anything that's a conflict with relation to today's agenda? No, good, we're okay there. Fine, in which case let's move on to the consent agenda. We've got quite a number of things on the consent agenda. We've received no comments in advance, so I'm just briefly going to go through each of them and just check that the committee is happy to either approve or note each of the agenda items. So the first thing we have is for approval is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I just check to see if anybody's got any amendments or observations they want to make before we approve it? Can't see anything, so can we note that that's been approved? The forward work plan has been provided for information, and we're just noting that. We've got the NDR programme phase 4 business plan, which again is for noting. I can't see any hands raised on that one. We've also got the electronic prescription service business case. Again, this one's for noting. The Programme Delivery Committee terms of reference, this is for approval and to reference on to our SHA board. So can I just check that we're all happy to approve? Please say something or raise your hand if you've got an issue. Rowan?
It's just really tiny. On the executive summary of the EPS, we're investing £24.8 because the million's gone.
Oh,
so
okay.
we just need a little M on that number.
Okay,
just proving I've read it. Thank you.
Good spot, Rowan. Belinda, could you make a note of that, please, and make sure it gets amended? Thank you. Okay, sorry, just go back to the terms of reference. We're happy to approve those? Yep, great, thank you. This committee, Programme Delivery Committee cycle of business, again, this is for approval. Can we just check that everybody's happy that we've got the right items on the forward work plan? Okay, great, thank you. And then the effectiveness report. This committee's only been up and running for 12 months, so this was quite important to get some feedback on how it's working. Thanks for everyone who participated in the survey. There are a couple of things which we will take into consideration. Myself as chair, along with Evan, who's the executive lead for this committee, and Chris Darling, our Director of Corporate Affairs, will take those on board. We may well pick them up at one of the development meetings that we do around the workings of this committee, just to make sure that it's as good and sound as we can make it. So there are a couple of observations there, and we'll pick those up. But we do need to approve. Sorry, no, this is for noting. Sorry. What I'm now do is move on to the annual report for this committee. This is for approval. Can I just check to see if anybody's got any observations on the document that's on the consent agenda before we formally approve that? Nope. Okay, we're good. So that's approved. And now move us on to the main agenda. The first item being the action log, and I'm pleased to say there are no outstanding actions on the public action log. There may be on the private one, which we'll do a bit later today, but for the public agenda, there is nothing on the action log. So we'll now move into the assurance items, and you will note that we've swapped the agenda a little bit. We're now doing the deep dive on 3 of our key programs first, and we'll do the summary of everything else second. It's a suggestion that Chris came up with, which even I thought was sensible. So we're giving it a try. We'll see how it works, and we may stick with that or change back depending on how it goes today. Okay, so the first item on the assurance reports then is the Welsh Patient Administration System, and for this I'm going to go to Sam Lloyd.
Thank you, David. I will just present my slides here. Okay, so this is the annual assurance report for the Bridgend transition programme, which is impacting on the WPAS system. So just to give a bit of an overview of what a PAS is. So a PAS is obviously a critical capability in secondary care, and it's used to record secondary care patient demographics, care providers and specialist service referrals, allows the scheduling and maintenance of appointments, ward activity and outpatient care episodes, including diagnostics and treatments pathways. The WPAS, so the Welsh Patient Administration System, is a service that we have built within DHCW, and it's used across all health boards in Wales, except Cardiff and Vale, who use their own service. It's a critical system, obviously, and there's some statistics that we've been compiling on this. And so, on average, WPAS is processing over 200,000 new GP, community and hospital-initiated referrals, 70,000 ward admissions, nearly 400,000 outpatient appointments and about 40,000 ED attendances monthly. So clearly a critical service for the nation as a whole. It helps to streamline workflow of the organisations and improve the efficiency of care delivery. It's also important to note that it's very closely integrated with other healthcare services, both locally and nationally. So that includes RADIS, the radiology service, LIMS for pathology, WCP, the Welsh Clinical Portal. And a big part of the work that we'll come on to in a second is around ensuring that those integrations remain current and effective whilst the transition of the Bridgend boundary change takes place. Some of the key capabilities of WPAS, I won't go through all of these in detail, but we can see clearly the range of activities in secondary care that the system supports. It's also a key data source for the Welsh Clinical Portal and the Welsh Nursing Care Record. So a lot of information from PAS is pulled into those services. There's quite a bit of work that's been going on nationally around WPAS over the last few years. So Betsy Cadwallader Health Board have migrated from 2 instances of Welsh PAS and 1 instance of a third-party product onto a single instance. That encompassed a lot of ways of working changes across the health board and application of consistent information standards. That work is now complete and is providing a blueprint for the work that's currently underway with the Bridgend transition. Velindre had its PAS functionality and datasets moved from CANISC, the legacy cancer system, onto WPAS in November 23. That work is also complete. And Prince of Wales activity, including GP sites, is in the process of being migrated from Swansea Bay to the Cyntaf Morgannwg instance of WPAS. And that includes quite a bit of data transformation activity, which is necessary to accommodate variances in ways of working across the health boards, which we see quite commonly nationally as well. The background to this work is that on the 1st of April 2019, Welsh Government transferred responsibility for services in Bridgend from what was at the time Abertell Bro Morgannwg University Health Board to Cyntaf University Health Board. And as part of that, those boards were renamed to Swansea Bay and Cyntaf Morgannwg as we now know them. SLA arrangements between those health boards permit CTM to use Swansea Bay IT services. That includes but isn't limited to WPAS to manage Bridgend patients while addressing the transition of services. And you can see on the map there the health board boundaries and Bridgend, so we can see the geographical impact of that change. This is a Cymtaf Morgannwg project to which DHCW is a contributor. It's funded through the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. As I mentioned earlier, WPAS is just one of the affected systems, so there's a huge amount of work going on within the health boards on their local services as well. But WPAS is obviously the national service, so that's where DHCW has primary involvement. Multiple national and local systems are impacted by the boundary change. As I've mentioned, there are SLA arrangements in place between the two health boards to allow CTM to continue to use Swansea Bay services where they need to. There's about 500,000 patient records in the Swansea Bay instance of WPAS, but we have recently agreed that only active CTM records are going to be transferred. I'll talk a little bit more about the scope of the programme in a second. Records will only remain active in the Swansea Bay PAS if there is ongoing Swansea Bay activity against those records. And the transfer of records between the two systems will invariably change the identifying references, and only the validated NHS number will remain constant. So there's a huge amount of data integrity work that needs to be done in order to ensure the consistency of those records as they're transferred from one to the other. So some additional considerations: both Swansea Bay and Cymtaf Morgannwg are part of the RISP and LIMS 2 programmes. So there's a lot of change activity which is running, which is affecting those health boards at the moment. So there's a lot of consideration in the planning that needs to be given to ensuring that those programmes are not tripping over each other and that resources are available to focus on each. And we've tried to be careful to make sure that we're scheduling activity so that we're not interrupting those other two major programmes as well. We've provisioned a secure environment for pre-production. We're in the process of integrating that at the moment, which we'll be using for testing, and that's due to be complete by the 31st of March. And before Christmas, we agreed a revised data migration option at the programme board, which means that now only the active record or the record set needs to be transferred from one PAS to the other, rather than the entirety of those records, which has reduced the volume of data that needs to be moved enormously, and simplifies the work and de-risks it quite significantly because of those data integrity issues that I mentioned earlier, or the complexity of the data. And then lastly, the specifics of the move. So we're now migrating 54,000 active record rows, which is associated to 1,200 Princess of Wales specialty and clinic configurations. That's down from a number that was up in the hundreds of thousands, so significant reduction in scope and significant de-risking as a result. There are about 466,000 new patient records with an active pathway that will be created in the Cymtaf Morgannwg WPAS. We've agreed with medical records teams at both health boards that we will use wrapper functionality to provide CTM WPAS users with a history summary. So because we're not moving the entire record, it's important that we're able, the medical records teams are able to interrogate records across both PASs. So we're using wrapper, which is a kind of integration and visualization tool that sits across the top of all of the PAS instances in Wales to enable that. We're doing sample validation of 2,700 records, which again is a massive reduction in the amount of testing that needs to be done, and therefore de-risks the programme significantly. The target for transition is the 16th of May. It's a big bang go live effectively, so that is a very critical date which we're working closely with both health boards to ensure that we hit. It's very high priority for all organisations, so it's a case of pulling out all the stops to make sure that we hit that date. And there are 8 data migration events which are taking place to improve the accuracy as part of the preparation for May. So that's the position that we're in. The work is progressing well. We are on target to hit that 16th of May date. It's been a huge effort by everybody involved, a good example of coordination across the service, but also important to point out that this is work that we're having to do as a result of multiple instances of WPAS existing across the system. So it is a cost of the way in which we have been working over the last few years. But that said, important to conclude and on track to do so. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks for that concise summary, Sam. Can I ask if the committee has any questions for you? Gideon.
Morning, David. Can you hear me? Okay, so obviously I live and breathe this problem because I work in Princess of Wales Hospital and patients across the organisation. And so what I would like us to do is to make sure that there are lessons learned about how we deliver the administration system. And by that I mean we should be reducing local variation in coding of pathways to its absolute minimum. There should be only really be a patient safety reason to deviate from what would be a national standard. And this is going to be a recurring problem. I would highlight the fact that GIRF, getting it right first time, came in to review the processes, particularly of urological services, which is a relatively fragile service, and we weren't able to amalgamate data across health boards because everyone was doing it differently. So if ever there was an example of a once for Wales approach to standardizing patient pathways, this is it, and this problem has come home to roost. Finally, I'd like to thank the team, okay, because it's a massive job, and we are cognizant that we do not want to lose patients in pathways because of the obvious potential harm that comes from that. In real life experience, I have to plug into 2 different plazas to treat patients across my health board. In terms of WCP feeds into the Swansea PAS in POW, but obviously WCP in the north of the organisation feeds into the CTM PAS. It really does highlight the fact that the case record number should become obsolete. We should be managing patients through the standard of the NHS number. Case records numbers only exist for the management of the paper notes. And as we move to an electronic world, we need to be removing the case record number, the reliability or the dependency on the case record number wherever possible. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Rydian. Rowan.
Thank you, David. So I'd like to kind of explore that, Rydian, because that was running through my mind, and I'm very aware that in looking at the WPAS lens of what it takes to move the boundaries, we're only seeing a very small part of the work that's going on. So Rydian, it would be really interesting for me to understand, what would it take to get at a policy level, the changes that you're very sensibly advocating for as we move into a digital world. And Sam, could you give us a sense of how much resource is being focused in digital health in Wales to keep us whole and making sure that the health boards are supported in this endeavour because of the multiple systems that are operating across the health boards? Because I think this is something that we need to have a better visibility to as we're thinking about future products and deployments in the NHS that in Wales, that the heterogeneity is cost. So in any order, if you could give me some colour on that, I'd be grateful.
Do you want to go first, David?
Yes, please, Rydian.
Okay, so well, there is policy direction, Rowan. Colleagues on here will often hear me say Welsh Health Circular 2015-049 use the NHS number in all correspondence relating to patient care. It is a safety requirement. So there's policy direction there, but there's also the issue of mandating the use of something and policing that. We also have standards relating to clinical conditions, and they're not implemented everywhere. So one of the things that we could do is we could lock down the user interface so it provides administrators with the opportunity to pick from lists rather than to create new codes. And that's something that we should look at to reduce the ability to create variation at a local level. There's some drilling here, so I'm going to stop speaking.
Okay, thanks, Rydian. Sam, in answering Rowan's question, can I tag a question of my own on as well? So there is a cost associated with this, which ultimately, if we'd have done what Ridian was suggesting, we as the NHS wouldn't have had to bear. So can you give some colour to the level of cost involved in this programme, and then how we communicate that upwards to policy and decision makers, so they've got some context when they're making decisions around new programmes?
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks, Rowan. So to answer your question first, David, so the total cost of this programme since it was conceived in 2019 has been around £7 or £8 million. So it's a very significant investment for NHS Wales, and that's essentially money that could have been used on a lot of development activity. From a DHCW perspective, we've got I think it's 20 resources working full time on this. So it is a very significant effort from a resource perspective for DHCW. So we've recruited people into the PAS team specifically to undertake this work, and they've been doing that for the last few years. So we've recently sought an extension on that as well for this year in order to make sure that the project is funded right up until the May period, which we've been able to secure. So yes, it is a very significant resource ask all round. In terms of that having been communicated upwards, David, well, it's part of the DPIF programme, so the money flows through that route. So Welsh Government are aware from that perspective. I think probably once we've concluded this work, we would absolutely be looking to do a lessons learned and a full review of the programme and the the need for it and the way in which it's been undertaken. And I think some of these issues should be teased out through that process.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Rowan. Rowan, still on mute.
And one last point is that it's not just cost. Adherence, Ridian, as it drives safety, I think is one of the things that we need to pull out. But presumably also operational optionality. There's a great focus on waiting lists, and patients may be willing to have treatment out of their health board if there's capacity, and having that integrated system just enables more fluidity and optionality across the health board. So I think that's one other thing we should be noting in terms of what comes from standardization.
Simon.
Just a small point picking up on that question around communicating upwards and into policymakers. I take every opportunity in any forum I'm in and I use the Bridgend data migration as an example of the you could describe it as the unintended consequences of not having single instance, both in patient safety, clinical effectiveness, and cost, and they're all laid bare in this particular example. Sometimes I feel I'm scattering seeds on a stony ground, but
at least we're getting the message
efforts
over.
are being made.
Okay, thank you. I'm reassured by that. Thanks, Simon. Ridian?
I've had to change headset. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to expand on the fact that if we're going to deliver care closer to home, regional diagnostic centres and treatment centres, we have to do that in a paper-light, at least paper-light, paperless way. And the only way we're going to do that is by amalgamating the record, collecting. You hear me say collect, store, share. And you've got to, when you collect it, you've got to meta tag it, label it in a way that it can be safely part of the record. And again, that relates to standards. And this work has again exposed the fact that those standards aren't adhered to. And there comes a point where we have to introduce technology that only allows the thing that's labeled appropriately to come through the technology sieve, as it were. Yeah.
Yes. Good point, Ridian. Okay, can I just check? Anybody else got any questions for Sam? Otherwise, we'll bring this update to a close and move on. I can't see any hands, so let's move on. Sam, thanks for all of the efforts that the team's put into this, and good luck with the transition on the 16th of May. I'll hopefully receive an update after that it's all gone well, fingers crossed. Okay, we're sticking with you, Sam, and we'll now move into the cloud migration programme. If you'd take us through that, please.
Thank you, David. I'll just present those slides as well. Okay, hopefully everyone can see those.
Yes, come through, thank you.
Okay, so we're in the interesting position here of providing an annual assurance report on a programme which is only just really in its mobilisation phase, but there is a huge amount of work that has been done in order to get us to this point. So, there is plenty to update the board on. So we have been planning the transition to cloud really for the last couple of years. So it's intrinsically linked to our strategic objectives. We wrote a cloud strategy 2 years ago, I think in 2012, just over 2 years in 2022, which set out our ambition to become a cloud first organization. The reason that we're looking to do that is are manyfold, in the sense that moving to cloud can be more cost effective if it's done appropriately. It can provide significant performance improvements. It can reduce time to market. It can reduce our carbon footprint. There are lots of reasons for needing to do this, and that's what's behind our cloud strategy. It's also the way that industry is increasingly working. It's the way that software providers expect us to work. So it's really an essential part of being a modern digital organization. That's not to say that cloud is always the right answer, but we need, it needs to be the approach that we would take in most cases, and we will be looking at other options by exception, essentially. There are lots of initiatives which are currently underway. So we've submitted a business case to Welsh Government to request funding. At the time of writing, this hadn't been approved and was still under consideration, but I'm pleased to say that it now has been approved. We didn't secure all of the funding that we asked for, but we have secured a chunk of it, which enables us to move forward with this programme, which is really good news. So in order to be ready for this work, we established the programme actually prior to the approval of the business case. As I mentioned, we've written the cloud first strategy. It is in DHCW's organisational strategy that we will have moved all our live services to the cloud and closed our data centres by 2030. And we've also been shifting towards a product-centric operating model for the last couple of years or so, and really having a mature cloud capability is an essential prerequisite of that, because a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve through the new operating model are predicated on cloud. So those reduction of time to market, increased use of automation, those sorts of things are all part of that. There's also a Welsh Government requirement which we've been set, which is to reduce our reliance on capital funding and shifting more to a revenue model. Again, that's really predicated on cloud. We're paying for what we consume rather than buying hardware up front. As I mentioned, in December, we received some feedback on that business case. We responded to that, and that now has been approved by Welsh Government. Moving on, some of the highlights from the current financial year. So we developed the business case, which was approved by the DHCW board and submitted to Welsh Government. There was a huge amount of work that went into the formulation of that business case. We worked with a range of suppliers, and we undertook a very detailed analysis of our resource utilisation and consumption across our data centres, built a cost model for the transition of those into cloud, and through that process we're able to demonstrate the economic benefits of the move alongside some of those other opportunities that I described. We have moved a significant proportion of our test and development environment already from on-prem into cloud, and as a result we've reduced costs by over £100,000 a year. We have a proposal for cloud network connectivity, which is also sitting with Welsh Government, and we're now able to move forward with that as well. So we've been working with Welsh Government to develop plans to extend PSBA, which is the Public Sector Broadband Aggregation Service, into cloud data centres. So this is something that not only will benefit DHCW, but will benefit the whole system in terms of enabling everybody who requires it to have resilient and high performance connectivity into commercial cloud environments. Also connected to that work, we've established a cloud ready boundary firewall architecture. So we've purchased replacement firewalls, and we're in the process of reconfiguring the boundary network connectivity in order to move it into a much more cloud ready kind of configuration. We've done pre-market engagement as well. So we issued a prior information notice via one of the major frameworks. to seek advice from the market on how to undertake this activity successfully from a commercial perspective. And we've had a really good response. We've had 67 expressions of interest, and a very significant group of suppliers joined an engagement session that we ran in January. And we're using the responses from that to help us structure the commercial approach to this programme. We've also been strengthening our leadership in this space. We've recruited to an associate director for cloud and infrastructure, and we've also appointed a cloud transition programme lead who will be joining us in April. So we're getting ready from a staffing and capability perspective as well. Sorry, these slides are a bit slow to move on. Immediate priorities, secure programme funding. As I say, at the time of writing, we didn't have that, we now do. Concluding the work with the PSBA team in Welsh Government to get that approach to cloud network connectivity set up. Concluding pre-market engagement, so that process has now closed and we're in the process of reviewing the outputs from that and working with our commercial team in order to shape up some requirements to go to market formally. Then actually going to market to procure a partner. We're in the process of working out what the time frame for doing that will be. Getting this right is going to be really important because we are going to require external resources and expertise to support us on this transition. And I'll outline a little bit about how we're intending to do that shortly, but making sure that we're able to use that process to build capabilities in our own team is a crucial part of that commercial strategy. Then we'll be delivering some prerequisite enabling work, so making sure that networking configuration and firewall configuration is right for the cloud, making sure that our landing zones are properly configured and we've got the right cybersecurity posture across them and so on, and then establishing the internal program team. So as I mentioned, we've recruited the program lead, but there are also some other internal resources around business change and architecture and things that we need to bring in to support that, because it's important that we've got the right client side capability to work alongside the suppliers and commercial partners that we bring in. So some indicative program phases. The detailed phasing and cost model is set out in the business case, but just to give an idea of the kind of phases. So year one, the current year that we're in, the ones with the yellow. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
The ones with the yellow ticks against them are work that is already completed. So business case development, recruitment of program lead, establishing our cloud operations and FinOps capability. That's a piece of work that's been ongoing for some time. Piloting migrations into Azure of our test dev systems, engaging with suppliers. Those are all things that we've concluded this year. Going into next year, so confirming that commercial approach and bringing partners in to work with us. Making sure that we've got the right supporting infrastructure in place, so around those landing zones and so on. Developing the detailed migration plans. So as part of the development of the business case, we did a fair bit of analysis of our existing systems to understand the treatment plan for those when they're moved into cloud. So will particular systems be lifted and shifted as is, or will they require a degree of reconfiguration as part of the move? We've got a lot of that information already, but that needs to be worked up into detailed migration plans, which we'll be doing alongside the suppliers and the program team. Recruiting those remaining program team members, and then integrating the cloud move into our ongoing operating model transformation. So this is part of the broader shift to product, which I presented to board on over the years, and which is now underway and is really starting to gather pace within operations, I think, and is shaping up very well. It's also part of the wider DHCW operating model transformation, which we're running through the Building Our Future programme. And then in years 3 and 4, that's really about the migration. So we're expecting the move of services to take between 2 and 3 years, depending on the detailed migration plans. And then that continued operating model transformation will be a key stream that runs through that over that period of time, because the transition of skills and capabilities is every bit as important as the transition of technology infrastructure. Then onto my final slide. So this is the one that sets out the commercial approach that we're looking to take. So our plan at the moment is to split the work into 3 lots. So there'll be one lot which is looking at technical readiness activities. So that's some of those things I've already described around making sure that the cloud landing zones are properly configured, making sure that we've got the right network connectivity in place, ensuring that our cyber posture is properly understood and implemented, and so on. Then we've got lot 2, which is the migration planning and support. So this is the lot where the actual work of migration will be done. So bringing in a partner to set up those migration routines, to do the detailed planning, and then to actually move stuff from one place to another, but working with our teams internally as well. This is not something we want the supplier to do to us. It needs to be done with us. And then the third lot is the organizational development element. So this is helping us with that capability transformation. So, ensuring teams are coming with us on the journey. But this is also going to be, this lot will contain some of the key elements of the program governance as well. So making sure that we're doing benefits realization throughout the whole process, ensuring that, this isn't going to be a case of moving everything into the cloud and then checking that it works. It's a case of moving things into the cloud, and as we do so, ensuring that we're realizing the cost improvements, realizing the carbon footprint improvements, realizing that we're ensuring that we're realizing the performance improvements, the time to market, the automation. All of those things need to be, we want to see those benefits delivered within the first 3 to 6 months, not after the 3 years. So for me, that's a huge part of this. It may be that we end up with one supplier that delivers all of these lots, or a mixture of suppliers across them, and we'll use the commercial process to determine that. And obviously the outcomes of the pre-market engagement that we've just concluded may change this approach somewhat, but this is our thinking currently. So that's it. So I hope that was helpful. I'm very happy to take any questions. I'll take the slides down.
Great, thank you for that summary. Sam, I'm delighted to hear that you've secured some funding for it. Let's start with some questions. Let's go to Marianne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam, for a very clear assurance report. And as the Chair said, we're delighted to hear that funding has been secured, although a chunk of it, not all, your words, I think, Sam. Could you tell us the implications of not getting the full funding, and what might be the residual risk for us thereof? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. So we've received all of the capital that we requested so actually we've received a 2-year funding settlement, which is positive, because a lot of the time we're receiving 1-year settlements on these programs, aren't we? So to have a 2-year settlement is good, and it gives us a good planning horizon. In year 1, we've received all of the capital that we've requested, and 2/3 of the revenue. So we're in the process now of working through what the implications of that are from a program perspective. So this is fairly recent news, so we've not done the full analysis at the moment. And so what we're doing now is working with the finance team to understand what that means in terms of what can we deliver, what may we need to defer. We may need to reprofile elements of the program into the following financial year. So we're in the process of working that through at the moment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Rowan.
Yes, thank you, David. And Sam, this might be a question that you may need to go away and think about, but building on exactly the question Marion asked, the question I was going to ask. So, the transition to cloud is fundamental to delivering these services across Wales. To have I appreciate the point about 2 years commitment, but to have this gap in revenue seems to imply to me a slowing down of rollout, or we're going to have to make some choices about where we put things. How does that play in terms of supporting the health boards, and how does it maybe impact some of the health boards? Have you had any comments or concerns voiced to you from your digital directors group? And the second piece then is about opportunity lost. So as we go to cloud, being able to have flexible compute to run things like, who knows, AI or some of the additional things across cloud-based systems, are we in danger of losing some of those opportunities on the horizon because of these choices that have to be made on funding right now?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Rowan. I think it's so, yeah, as you suggested, some of that is being worked through at the moment. So, we don't have the full picture of the impact of the reduced funding at the moment. I think impact on the health boards is probably going to be limited in the sense that this is about the migration of the services that we host in our data centers. So our primary consideration in that sense is that we don't impact service through the course of the migration. So the impact on health boards would be if there were problems during migration which caused service instability or outages or that sort of thing. So we'll be planning the program carefully to make sure that doesn't happen. We're not migrating services on behalf of health boards at the moment, although there may be opportunities in the future to see whether or not this work gives us a platform on which we can then offer out services more broadly. We're looking at creation of a cloud centre of excellence potentially, or a centre for enablement, as I would probably prefer to call it now. So those are opportunities, I think, which will exist as part of this transition. But in the short term, I don't foresee any particular impacts on the health boards as a result. I think the opportunities lost piece is a good question. I think we're looking to deliver AI capabilities through the NDR program. That's we're in the process of seeking phase 4 funding for that at the moment. So I think those outcomes will still be in a good place as a result of that. So I think the transition gives us opportunities to make use of cloud capabilities that we don't currently have, but the extent to which that will be limited through the reduced funding that we've got in the next year, I'm not sure we're able to say with certainty at the moment.
So I think that's a very helpful and understandable answer, Sam. And I guess the reason that I just wanted a little discussion on it is these are the kind of back office investments. It's similar to cyber. You said health boards won't notice whether it's in the cloud or on prem. But the investment in terms of giving us, flexibility and optionality to provide better services in the future, and when budgets are tight, it's not something that necessarily health boards are going to ask for because it's a kind of almost zero-sum game for them. So I think how we make the case and articulate the consequential impact of funding in these areas is a challenge, and one that perhaps we should revisit.
Yeah, I think
when we've had time to do the work and obviously a bit more research.
Yeah, and sorry, just to add to what I said, I think that what the health boards will notice over time is our ability to move much more quickly once we're operating in a cloud native environment. We're in the process at the moment of looking to transform our integration capability, which we know is a significant bottleneck. Over the course of the next few months, we're hoping to build a proof of concept or an MVP kind of environment, which will be cloud native. Once that's up and running, our ability to deliver integration should accelerate, really significantly, and that'll be something which has a massive impact on health boards, because everything that they ask us to do at the moment has an integration knock-on, and those things take far longer than they should. So by moving into this much more mature delivery environment, we will be able to improve the service that we provide. So if the rate at which we're able to do that slows, that will have a knock-on effect.
And a good contrast, I think, between the previous topic, £6 to £7 million of investment, kind of unpicking, the consequences of decisions that were made, which were right for a health board or us at the time, versus making an investment now that allows us to go much faster and get people into a more robust, digital, flexible environment. And I think we need to be able to articulate those choices that are being made.
Yeah.
But thank you for the update. That was really helpful.
Thanks, Ryan. Any more questions for Sam? Sam, I have one, if I may. So the funding settlement is for 2 years, but your programme goes well beyond that. So is it your expectation that after the 2 years we'll secure some more funding for ongoing work that's identified in your programme?
Yes, it is, Dave, because one of the things that Welsh Government have asked us as part of the approval is that we continually refresh the business case with information that we gather as the work proceeds. So our expectation is that we will be sharing that refreshed business case with them at intervals, and hopefully that will then unlock further funding. So yeah, that is our expectation.
Okay, excellent, great, fine. Okay, I see no further questions. So Sam, thanks for the update. Really pleased that you've secured most of the funding you were looking for, and we'll look forward to further updates coming back to this committee downstream. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to our third and final assurance report. And for this, we're going to go to Margaret for the GP Systems Framework contract.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for welcoming me today to give an update on one of our major programmes of work in primary care. So my name's Margaret, and I'm the Deputy Director for Primary Care in DHCW here in Sam Hall's absence. Now, you'll know from the slides and the paper that one of the major areas of work in primary care is the large-scale migration of GP systems across Wales that we're undertaking. This is for the provision of our core clinical system, or the service delivery of general practice, with the migration programme starting formally last year in July. Now, I'm not planning to share any slides, partly because those that you'll have seen, we've got an update on progress for you there. So I'm pleased to report it continues to go as planned. It's going really well. And so as of the end of January, 48 of 194 practices have migrated from one to another, leaving 146 remaining. Now, the work is challenging for the practice teams, for our suppliers, and for our team supporting it. There's a whole load in there to ensure that it's done safely: preparation, decommissioning, installation, data migration, testing, integration, quality assurance, training, of course, familiarisation with a new piece of software, and all in with steady state monitoring as well to make sure it's all going well. So it's hugely complex work. I can't overstate that. And how important it is also that it's managed in a way that it reduces disruption for our practices, for patient, and of course ensures clinical safeties. Now, as I mentioned, 48 practices have successfully migrated, with 39 now in stable operations with no significant issues. Of the 146 practices remaining, 22 are in the preparation phases. So this just continues. They're getting ready to migrate, and at the height of delivery we'll have around 40 practices at various stages of transition with the current plan. So with the progress and the smooth running of this challenging migration. Now, the board will also be aware from the slides that we learned in mid-December that our outgoing supplier had placed itself into administration due to financial difficulties. The business does continue to trade, our service is unaffected, and a process has been run to find a new buyer, which we expect to be able to report on in due course. DHCW has managed this as a major instance, and of course we'll provide an update on the next steps after that commercial process has been completed. I'd really like to extend my thanks to the teams across the organisation for the hard work. It's been a really organisation-wide approach, from technology, operations, commercial, communications, to ensure that continuity of service and keeping stakeholders right across the system regularly updated. We're also really grateful to colleagues in Welsh Government who collaborated with us really well, the NHS exec and the health boards for their ongoing support. So just a brief update on that, and thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that summary. Rowan. Rowan, you're still on mute.
So thank you, Margaret, and thank you for talking without reference to the slides. It was very fluent, and thank you for that. The thing that I'm really interested in is the sort of having a number of practices sort of going through this readiness rollout and then progression to stable operation. Can you tell me what's the general time that a practice is exposed between rollout to achieving stable operations? Sort of what's that period of uncertainty? And I guess a follow-up question, are you seeing that shorten, or is that something that is, you know, probably going to be a similar amount of time for every practice that goes through this transition phase?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. The overall process generally looks to be about 12 weeks long, and that's from so there's normally a 3-month notice period before we even start any of the preparation work that starts another 3 months later. That's how it's run to date. And it's then a 12-week process between when we kick off the work and when go live happens. Now, some practices might be stable and very comfortable within a couple of weeks, and some practices might take up to 6 months. And that just differs based on a range of factors, but essentially around the maturity and resources available in those practices. So it does differ in the team's experience, but with the outliers being at about 6 months to stability, it's a huge change in the way of working, getting used to a new software for all of those key core clinical operations. So it does differ, but and does it shorten over time? What we're certainly finding is some of the issues that have been reported, we've been able to improve and iterate and over time. Looking at data migration issues, there's certainly work to do in that area, and we continue to do hires. There's clinical skills needed in the data checking piece, and that takes time, but safety is obviously paramount in the process. Yeah, I hope that helps to answer.
Thank you, Margaret. That's really helpful. And it goes to show how complex a challenge this is. So thank you.
Indeed. Marion.
Thank you, diolch Margaret. Very helpful update and very clear. Perhaps this is an unfair question, and I don't mean it to be, but on the liquidation, the announcement the INPS is going into liquidation, and you describe it as a major incident for DHCW. I just wonder whether there are any real lessons to be learned from what has evolved during this process, and it may be something I'm sure we'll come back to, but I just wonder whether you had any initial thoughts about that. Diolch.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Someone new to the organisation, it actually gave me great confidence in seeing the teams kick into action in a very smooth way. We were able to stand up the 4 work streams that are working as a major incident really quickly. I think that's been incredibly positive. I do understand that there was no sort of warning about this process or being about to start. I'd ask questions about that, I think, for future, and it's something I'd want to understand more about. But at that point, there was no indication of the financial situation of the organisation. So that's probably all I could share at this point, Marion. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay. Simon.
Not a question, more of a comment observation. Is just I think it would be remiss of us not to express huge appreciation. I think, Margaret, you were moments into the job when this came across your desk, for the work that's been done in, obviously it's not a done deal yet and it's not finished, but the work that's been done so far in mitigating as far as is humanly possible all the risks around this. And I think it's interesting to note that we've had appreciation from the BMA in the way in which it's been handled, and the Minister at our meeting with her at the beginning of this week expressed the appreciation for the way it's been handled, because it is an enormously complex but mission critical issue to deal with in terms of the delivery of primary care services for a not inconsiderable number of people across Wales. So I think I'd certainly like to express my appreciation. I'm sure we will as a committee, and I'm sure we will do as a board, for all the efforts that have gone in so far, and wish you all the very best for a completion of a safe conclusion to this very, very tricky issue. And it does raise, I think, some wider issues that you've alluded to there, Margaret, around how our reliance on external commercial suppliers works into the future. And I think we need to be looking at that strategically, because these are long-term relationships that are essential to the operation of safe and effective clinical services. And I think that does then mean we at least need to have that serious conversation about how we operate in that environment, working with suppliers and ensuring continuity of supply. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay. Chris.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it was picking up a point actually Margaret and Simon mentioned, just to respond to Marion's question around some of the learning. I think it was certainly the element that this came out of nowhere to some extent. We weren't expecting it, and we do a lot, don't we, of risk management and scanning the external environment, and a risk being something that could happen that will have an impact on our, operations or achieving our objectives. Well, this is certainly one of those, and it wasn't really flagged from a risk perspective. And you can't always foresee these things, but that is something I think we should look into. As Simon mentioned, we have a lot of relationships with suppliers, different different sizes of suppliers, different relationships, but I think that's something we do need to have a little bit of a focus on.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, just responding to that. I mean, I think these situations you're never going to have warning of, because commercial organizations know the moment that they talk about these things, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, that confidence evaporates. So you tend to have this kind of one, it's just dropped on you. And I think we've had a couple of similar cases across our supplier groups. I think one of the things to just flag is the additional resilience and self-determination that we build through the NDR, in that at some point, the data will live in both, the third-party application, and there will be an integration available in the NDR. And that's quite important to think about with some of the other choices that are being discussed at the moment, which is, if I think about other healthcare systems that I'm aware of, some providers, the data only exists within their system, so it becomes locked into that system, and you don't have the opportunity to build in that resilience and self-determination. So just a couple of comments there. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Rowan. Let's go to Rhaglenni.
Thank you, David. Two things for me. One is dependency on a commercial supplier holding the data, and this reinforces the necessity to make sure that with any commercial supplier, the data is held within the architecture of the NHS in Wales, and that is the NDR and the CDR as a way forward. What we have learned from the process is that, again, configuration of data, different data standards makes amalgamating and moving data more difficult. So again, it's hitting home the fact that we should record apples as apples and not as anything else. And it comes with the startling facts that we've lost over 100 GP practices across Wales in the last decade. So it's a fragile service, high demand, a movement away from partnerships and permanency and through GMS contracts. And it's a real crisis in primary care, and that is we have to support them in every way possible. So I'm really, really grateful to the team, the way that they're trying to transition each practice, holding their hands, being there. This is changing plane engines in the air. And it has an impact on patient care. So well done to the team. Keep going. We would ask you to go faster, but I'm sure you're going as fast as you can. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the analogy about changing aircraft engines in air, Rhaglenni, but let's move to Evan.
Thanks, David. I just want to add, really, and maybe expand a little bit on Rowan's point. I was, like Rhaglenni, also going to comment on the work that the teams have done on this, particularly the commercial engagement that we've had, and certainly in the initial phases we were leading and coordinating the work across the 4 nations. I think it's a real credit to teams right across DHCW in multiple directorates, because it really was a collaborative, collective effort. I think that the point about where is data held and what happens if the system that holds that data goes down for any reason, and it can go down because of potential risks around a company administration, for example, but it can go down for a cyber incident as well. If we feel that any of the systems that are part of our wider architecture are compromised, then immediately we close those systems off. And in most healthcare systems, I think there is a deliberate architectural choice to store data only in the system in which it is collected. that is actually one of the NHS England principles, that data should be held in the system in which it is collected, and you have then a fetch and gather type of architecture where other systems call that data and pull it in. We have taken a very conscious choice in Wales to have a different approach, where the NDR is intended to have a complete, comprehensive and persistent data store as a kind of a reference foundational data layer. And I think this has really made me appreciate some of the significant advantages of that. The only thing I guess I'll emphasize, and I'll take advantage of an opportunity. So I'll take the opportunity is one of my little quotes. So data is for life, applications are just for Christmas, because over a period of 20 or 30 years, we will not be using the same front-end user systems as we are using today, for sure, but the data is still there and relevant throughout the whole lifetime of a patient, and indeed beyond. And I think that is a really important thing. The second is that it's not just the technical interoperability that we can build into the architecture, which we already have really in the NDR. We are able to access primary care data and to present that in the Welsh Clinical Portal. But there's a whole host of other things around information governance, around assurance, and around the permissions that are attached, and indeed third-party suppliers' willingness to open up the data which is in their system and to synchronize it with a reference data store. So we're making very good progress, and we're moving into a very exciting phase on the NDR, as you've seen from the Phase 4 business plan that was noted in the consent agenda, but there's still quite a lot of work to do.
Okay, thank you for that additional comments, Stephen. I'd really like the data for life applications Christmas bit. I might pinch that myself. So, Rowan.
So just articulating the obvious. We've just had 3 programs come to this committee. They very clearly exemplify the importance of architecture. One in terms of the choices you make early on with Bridgend. It's not a zero-sum cost or opportunity decision. We've incurred that with the boundary move. The cloud piece, 2/3 of revenue, is the revenue that will drive how fast we get return on this investment. And so the fact that we've only got 2/3 instead of 100% actually will have impact on how fast we can achieve benefits. And then I think, Margaret, everything that Rydian and Ivan have kind of said to the team, I mean, I'm in awe of the speed in which you've been able to deal with this issue. It's truly impressive. But, we have areas of our core services, primary care, it's the front door. I hope it's the front door. Nobody wants to find the emergency room as the front door into the NHS in Wales. And for commercial reasons, you can find that front door without hinges. So the investment in NDR, and I think if we could perhaps do something in terms of communicating to the wider ecosystem in Wales how we can spend money fixing the wiring, or we can spend money deriving value to the health system, because there is only a fixed amount of money, and we should be thinking about how we can allocate that money to the second option rather than being dragged back by the first. And so I'd really like us to think about how we could simply articulate that, perhaps, going forward.
Yes, thanks for that bit of insight, Rowan. I can't see any more questions, so let's draw this section of the agenda to a close. Can I just thank Margaret for the presentation and the discussion that ensued? And we have received a couple of updates previously on this, and we're all aware of the work that's been done on this programme, and I'd like you to please pass on our thanks from this committee to the team for all the good work that they've done to get us to this point. So before we move on to section 5 of the agenda, we're going to take a short 15-minute comfort break. We're slightly ahead of schedule, so I suggest we resume at 11:25, please. And during the break, could I just remind you to place your microphone on mute and turn off your camera, and we'll resume in 15 minutes time. Thanks. Excellent. Okay, I think we have everybody that's coming back with us. So let's progress to part 5 of the agenda and item 5.1, which is the major programs report. And for this, we'll look to initially provide a summary of the report, and then either lead or call in support from colleagues for each of the programs that we haven't covered in the deep dives. So over to you, please, Evan.
Thank you very much, David. If anything is flaky, it's because I've just moved offices and technology. We have some building work happening here, so I'm on Sam Lloyd's rig rather than my own. So I'm familiarizing myself with how various things work.
Okay.
I'm just going to give an introduction and a quick overview of the programs dashboard, the portfolio programs dashboard, and then the escalations that we have to the programs delivery committee, and then we'll go through the individual reports in the way that we usually do, where I'll bring in colleagues. So I'll be leading on some of those, and Michelle will be leading on some, and we have I think we have Lee joining us as well for some of the primary care mental health ones. The things that I've got 3 things really, I guess, to highlight or to call out on the programs dashboard. It's becoming a familiar tool for us now. We're using the same dashboard in many different environments. The first thing is just to reflect on the not assessed status. So that is the grey rating, which we've discussed at previous programs delivery committees. And I think it was yourself and Simon who suggested that we should look at the way that we are reporting programs when they're read. Historically, when they're paused, or when there's a major reset which introduces a high degree of uncertainty, we've reflected that as read. But this is an amendment to those to that approach, classed as not assessed. And the situations in which things would be not assessed, there are 4 programs currently in not assessed, would be if there's a major review going on, or if it's a new program which is yet to start up, or if it's a program which is now in its closure phase, and therefore the question of delivery confidence against objectives is not a particularly relevant one. So we'll see now that cloud transition, which is grey on the portfolio report that you have today, will move into red amber green delivery confidence in the ordinary way as it operationalizes now that the funding is confirmed, for example. So I think that process is working well for us, and we're working closely, obviously, with Welsh Government on that, as well as this public scrutiny and assurance for the board. I think that discussion with the Welsh Government on red amber green delivery confidence has been constructive and very helpful. We report that monthly in our integrated quality, performance and delivery meetings with Welsh Government. Last week's meeting particularly I thought was a very constructive conversation, and I'll just sort of recap the headlines. So there was a deep dive last week to Welsh Government on the 2 diagnostics programs. I won't go into the detail here because Michelle will give an update later on, both at a critical point with a compressed timetable. And the conversation was to seek, government was looking for assurance that we were on the revised implementation timetables and that we would hit them. And the summary of the conversation was that there are lots of challenges because we're, for different reasons, the implementation timetables are significantly compressed, much tighter than they would ordinarily be because of historic reasons. And there are challenges, of course, lots of bumps in the road, but our current view is that we can hold to that implementation timetable, and there is really good open partnership working with health boards in these complex collaborative programs. And so the government was asking, why then are those programs rated red amber? If you've got a reasonable confidence that you will hold the implementation timetable, why are you reporting a low confidence in the program dashboard? Which I think was a very good question, and there are a number of reasons to do with that, including particularly the way that sub-projects or local projects report their delivery confidence. So broadly, if local projects are reporting red or red amber, then we tried to accommodate that in the headline program reporting, and we tried to reach a consensus on this. Government has asked us, to go back and to explore and test that with our delivery partners, with them self-sited on that. And I think that is a very helpful contribution from Welsh Government. And also it reflects how the consistent RAG framework has landed and is being used as a tool to bring more consistency and a common understanding. And I really, really welcome that support from them. And then on top of that, we also, behind this front-end program dashboard, we report the quarterly milestones into the Welsh Government as part of our regular DPIF reporting for national programs. And those are, there are around 70 milestones that we report in detail to them. My overall reflection on that is that the last 3 to 6 months has felt more stable. I'm choosing my words very carefully here. It has been very busy. It's been very, very intense. Program teams are working extremely hard, and I'm always impressed and proud of the work that program teams within DHCW are doing, and the collaborative partners that we have in these very large, complex, challenging programs. But I think that the last 6 months, this felt to me at the kind of the strategic or the whole portfolio level that there's been a very welcome degree of stability in the sense of a regular pattern, and in the sense of a machine spinning fast, but without vibrating too much. And I just want to recognise that I think that the close working with officials in the Welsh Government Digital Policy team has been a helpful part of that. We've worked really closely with them through August and into September to reset the milestones for the programmes. That's brought a degree of structure and a degree of stability. We engage with them monthly, both through the DPIF and through the IQPD arrangements, and that has helped us to have some more of this stability, more pattern, and more of a common understanding. I think there's also been some stability in personnel as well in the Welsh Government digital team, and that has really helped us in that phase. It's not all. That's all very silver lining. As you know, I'm glass half full, so I've got to balance both ways. There is still, and I'll cover this briefly in the escalations that we have afterwards, there's still a high degree of uncertainty looking forward into the future funding pattern for 25-26. And I think on reflection, we're starting to see a kind of a pattern through the year emerging. The first half is quite turbulent because very often the funding for the year is quite late being confirmed to us, and very often is less than originally requested or less than the planning assumptions that we have made, and therefore program teams during the first quarter of the year have got to re-engineer their program plans and have got to adapt them. And we had that conversation just earlier in Sam's update about the funding allocation is 2/3 of what was requested in the business case, and therefore the team is going to have to go back and re-engineer and look for opportunities to be more efficient. So that brings in a degree of turbulence and change in the first 2 quarters of the year usually, and then we have some smooth running, or relatively smoother, more stable running in the second half of the year. So bearing that in mind, the focus from the portfolio management perspective over the next 6 months, over the next month or two, is going to be about securing the funding allocations that we have from Welsh Government and documenting those so that we know what the government's expectations are, and I'll mention that in a moment in the escalations. But from the portfolio management perspective, is to recognise that program teams internal within each program will be quite busy in reviewing and amending their delivery plans within each program, so that to take some of the pressure off is not to make significant changes that impact internal to programs, but rather the Portfolio Management Office will look at some of the things that are in our pipeline and our pre-program management phase. Where do programs come from? How do we design programs? How can we move towards standardizing digital business cases? How can we move towards standardizing our approach to benefits forecasting, benefits management through the life of a program? These are things that we need to get right before a program even exists, in a way. They're part of the program design phase, part of the program investment case phase. So we're going to look at that over the next 6 months, working closely with the finance team and with others, and trying to learn lessons from across our experience of delivering the portfolio, in anticipation that internally programs are going to need to make some changes based on not receiving the the full funding anticipation. So those are my reflections on the portfolio overall. The rating clearly is there's progress and there's movement, and it's looking healthier from that sense. I think the thing that, as always, I emphasize on that is that most of the programs are major national collaborative transformation programs in which health boards and trusts are our decision partners. So for programs like the diagnostics programs or for the national data resource, that DHCW does not make decisions on its own in these spaces. We make those decisions with our delivery partners, and there's a high degree of interdependency. We are starting to see some other programs. The cloud transition program, for example, is much more within our own sphere of authority, I suppose we would call it. And of the others, the GP systems framework and the NHS Wales app, for different reasons. Also, I think there's more. There's a stronger leadership role or a clearer leadership role for DHCW in those spaces. Although, of course, we still work very, very closely with our partners through our engagement strategy to make sure that we're fully sighted on their expectations, keeping them abreast of where those programs are going. But the decision, there's a stronger decision leadership, I suppose, in those three programs compared to the others that are in the portfolio. I'll just, before we move on to the escalations, I'll just pause in case anybody else wants to comment or raise any questions or anything up on the overall portfolio dashboard highlight report.
Can't see anything even, but I would say the challenge from Welsh Government on the use of red on the diagnostic programmes, I think that's, from what you said, that's encouraging, and we should maybe take a look at that in terms of how it sort of rolls up into the bigger programme. And the so I'll look forward to seeing what comes from that. I can't see any other hands, so if you want to move on to the escalations, please.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. So the escalations are on one slide. We have two live escalations that we're holding. So these escalations, just to remind, they programs escalate internally within DHCW to the Portfolio Management Board, which is part of our internal management arrangement, and then certain escalations from there that can't be resolved or which are or which need to be escalated for alert or advisory reasons are then escalated up to the Programmes Delivery Committee, where we are here. So the first of them is an escalation around the lack of chairs appointed to different programmes. There's I think that the Welsh Government appointment of chairs into programmes has settled down and has matured, and is working well, and we value the input that chairs are bringing to that. They work closely in partnership with the DHCW executive lead on those chairs where they are appointed, and we had some gaps. So those gaps have been filled in different ways. We're holding the action and the escalation where it is for the time being, but and not changing the wording of the escalation, even though it's out of date, and rather providing commentary against it. So there is now a chair in place for the Welsh Intensive Care Information System Programme appointed by Welsh Government, and as committee members will be aware, Mike Emery, the Welsh Government CDO, is the interim chair of the NDR programme, initially for a period of 6 months, which runs towards the end of March. So we're going to need to have a conversation with him soon to understand his intentions as regards appointing a permanent chair, and we've been managing the governance issues, the potential for Mike being on both ends of the governance in relation to the business plan. Mike stepped out of the NDR programme board meeting. I took the chair in order to complete the approval of that business plan for submission to Welsh Government, because Mike will be chairing the investment panel inside Welsh Government when it arrives. So we're proactively trying to manage that potential conflict, which I think is which has been raised as a concern by programme board members and here. So on programme chairs, I think it's still something that we need to keep an eye on, the presence of programme chairs across all of those programmes and their terms of appointment. But there is progress being made against those. And then secondly is about the funding.
Even just
position.
before you move
Yes,
on,
certainly.
can I just be clear? Are there any programmes without a chair that are funded and have a RAG status against them that's not grey?
I I think Connecting Care is in an ambiguous situation,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes, so we are without a chair. I think we're still just finalising what Welsh Government wants the governance of the Connecting Care Programme Board to cover, and the extent of their accountability. We need clarity on that. I think a few chairs have been approached, but as yet they've refused to take it forwards when there isn't a lack of clarity on the accountability range. So I think we need to get that kind of governance completely clear with Welsh Government, and then they can cycle back and see whether one of those chairs would be interested in picking up the chalice challenge.
Challenge is probably a better word, because yes. Anyway, anything else, or is that it?
No, I think on the chairs, I think a natural question would be, well, when would this be de-escalated?
Yeah.
And I think we will very soon be coming to a sort of a cycle point where the initial terms of appointment of the first round of chairs will be coming up. There's Mike and I co-chair a program chairs network. The next one of those is meeting in March, I think, or end of February or the beginning of March, where we discuss with all of the program chairs how that is working. We use it as a peer network, but also to communicate to chairs about how that governance layer is working for them and for Mike and in Welsh Government, and how we manage the, if you like, the cycle of appointments. So I think when we've been through that first cycle, which will be in the next 6 months, I would expect, then we'll have an established pattern of working, and I think then it would be appropriate to de-escalate this, because there'll be more assurance for PDC, because it can see that the process is working and there's a regularity to it. And then on funding, I expect that this funding will be more persistent as an escalation. We for 25-26, we currently have indicative planning figures from the Welsh Government. Those are subject to ministerial approval, and so they haven't been formally communicated to us yet, although we're expecting within the next few weeks, hopefully, we will receive a confirmed funding indication together with a mandate letter, as was discussed at the SHA board last week, which will include some expectations of milestones for delivery against that funding. The funding indicated to us at the minute is in some cases less than what is in the business cases or business plans or the current program plans. So teams are going to need to address that and to work through that in the first half, as I was mentioning earlier. And in most cases, I think the cloud transition is an exception to this, as Sam was saying earlier. That's just 1 year of funding. There's a challenge, the length of that funding runway, which we understand because of the Welsh Government's own budgetary position, the constraints that are upon the Welsh Government. That does bring a certain degree of risk into all of the programmes, as the committee's discussed before, about how do we plan our resourcing, contracts, employment, and a variety of other things when we're never more than 12 months from not having any confirmed funding in most cases. So I think that will remain as an escalation to the Programme Delivery Committee. We're working through the cycle this year and hoping to land that within the next few weeks with Welsh Government.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And just to confirm that we're still awaiting the mandate list that hasn't arrived.
Yes, it hasn't. No.
Okay. Fine.
No. Well, we understand it's with the minister, and so imminent, but.
Okay. It was imminent last week, I seem to remember, but okay. It is what it is.
Yep. And then the final one, we're proposing to de-escalate this. This related to some change. So the confirmation of some funding within the DSPP program. There was a combination of funding that was coming from the planned care program to support a package of planned care features and a reclassification or a capital revenue swap, amending the money. This relates to the DSPP program runs on a process of delivery increments, work packages that last 12 weeks each. So there was some uncertainty that was bringing some risk into the program and its delivery timetable for the year around delivery increment 5, which started in at the end of October or the beginning of November, and delivery increment 6, which started in the middle of January, around about three weeks ago. But we've received confirmation from Welsh Government on both of those in time for both those delivery increments to continue, and therefore this escalation has been resolved, and we're recommending it's closed and dropped from the PDC register.
Okay. Thanks for that, Evan. Do you want to move on to the first of the programmes now?
Marvelous, which is the National Data Resource. So
Indeed,
I'm taking the National Data Resource. So in these updates, basically just give a brief highlight of what's been going on over the last 3 months, what we've got ahead of us, and then invite questions and comments from the panel. So the last 3 months have been very focused on developing and agreeing the phase 4 business case. So that's what I'll focus on mainly. It's quite an involved process because the NDR is a very federated program. There's a strong combination of national and local delivery. Local partners all have an input into the development of each phased business case. They're 2 years each within the whole 10-year arc of the program. And so we manage that through lots of workshops, lots of stakeholder engagement, and the program board, which has got a strongly federated representation. The business plan was on the consent agenda earlier. It sets out the ambitions for phase 4, which are very strongly geared towards now migrating data from legacy infrastructure and data stores into the new data store. Alongside that, there's some work that needs to be done to continue to complete the definition of FHIR profiles and APIs in different areas, but that work is planned, and we'll be moving into sort of detailed delivery from the beginning of April, subject to approval of the business plan that's submitted to the Welsh Government. But again, we've had indicated funding from Welsh Government that meets most of the requirement, not the whole, but most of the requirement.
Okay. Are you pausing there for questions?
I am, yes.
Yep, fine. Okay. Any points for even on the National Data Resource Programme? Can't see anything. When you say indicative funding, are we in the position again where it's likely to be less than the ask?
It is slightly less than the ask, yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure quite how much less. I mean, it's not half of the ask, and it is an increase on our current run rate.
Okay.
But we're going to need to do some re-engineering in year. It's fluid because at the same time the Welsh Government is also asking us to accelerate delivery against the national target architecture and a bunch of other things. The data layer obviously is a key part of the national target architecture, and is the one where we're most mature in terms of our assessment of what we have and the design of what we need to build and move to.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Evan.
Now I'm just checking to see if I've got the same agenda. So in the slide deck that I have, the report slide deck, cloud transition is next, but I haven't got the agenda in front of me.
Let's stick with the agenda because that's what
yes, which is what I just remembered that it wasn't.
For the Welsh Community Care Information System and Connected Care.
So should we go to Lee for that?
Yes, please. Just so I can stick to what I've got printed off in front of me.
Thank you, Evan. I think the WCCIS and Connecting Care programme has been a manifestation of that turbulent annual cycle in spades in terms of the one that Ivan described. But I think we are starting to see some clarity now as we move towards the end of the year. I think it's been a very challenging first half of the year, and I think there's 3 areas that probably worthy of updates. So there is the area of funding, the area of kind of governance and passing accountability to the local authorities for their implementation response, and then agreeing with health boards how we move forwards in terms of supporting them. So in terms of, I'll cover the second first, governance, fairly quickly. We are responding to Mike Emery on what we think the governance should look like. Local authorities have responded in terms of their governance, and they submitted a business case for what they felt was their element of accountability back in October. So that the path of that responsibility will hopefully be defined in that new governance, and that kind of gives us quite clear responsibility and accountability between us and local authorities. So hopeful that will help us resolve the local authority situation. They are ploughing on with their implementation planning, so that they have been through procurement and have procured suppliers to deliver implementation. So whilst it's very challenging for them, they are on the right path and making good progress. It is a very challenging timeline to implementation, but they are making good progress. So we need to get the health boards into a similar situation. So I think that's all I'll cover on the governance. In terms of funding, it's a two facets to that. One is the escalations and issues around the funding this year. We came into the funding this year on the back of a 3-year agreement. That 3-year agreement had £4 million left in it. That was revised down to 2.4 million as a result of adjustments made by Welsh Government. The 4 million was due to cover our committed spend within DHCW, some a regional spend of around about 1.4 million, and then a discretionary spend of 200 or 300k that was being used to support connecting care activities. So that was stripped back to the committed fund of 2.4 million. So that left us with a considerable challenge as we've moved through the year. I can confirm that the regional funding element of that has now been covered for the year. DHCW found additional monies to cover the first quarter, 395,000, and Welsh Government have agreed to give us 1.05 million to cover the other 3 quarters. So that's good news. That clarity is now in place, and we're seeing how we can distribute that funding as a matter of urgency and get clarity exactly where we are on Q4. But they haven't agreed to fund some of the additional costs we had around connecting care, building the business case, building the requirements, preparing procurement. So we are still in a slightly overspent position, but considerably better off than we were, at the previous update. So that's where our funding. In terms of funding going forwards, the business case has now been reviewed. It was deferred by the committee within Welsh Government, Digital Investment Board. I think it's DIP, so Digital Investment. I don't know, looking at Ivan to know what the P stands for, but it was deferred. They've asked us, so there was a little bit of a mismatch in timing. We put our OBC in, which included all of the local authority elements. The local authority then subsequently put their own business case in. So we've now got an activity to remove all of the local authority stuff and resubmit the business case. It gives us another opportunity to agree with health boards exactly what we're covering off. I'll come to that next. So we are working on revising that business case and getting it back in as a matter of urgency. That will then hopefully provide us with clarity for next year's funding. What the final area was exactly what is it that we are delivering on, supporting the health boards to do. It's been a little fragmented through the year as a number of the health boards have spun off to deliver their own mental health solutions. We've continued to support them with requirements and artifacts and whatever support they needed to do that. But we're now kind of narrowing in on what would be the forward scope for connecting care in terms of the implementations. That would include community health services for most, if not all, of the health boards, and mental health support for at least some of the health boards. Whilst that might not be us procuring on their behalf, we will certainly support them to go out and buy adequate solutions to service their mental health clinicians. So I think we are getting to a point of some clarity in terms of planning for next year now, which is a relief. I think that we are getting to that position. So a reasonably positive outturn to the year, I think, if we can kind of resolve all of those issues. So I think that's the update. If there are any questions, happy to take them.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Ruth.
Thanks, Lee. I mean, this is an incredibly complex piece of work, as we know, and has been going on for some time. So I just really commend the work of you and the team to pull this together. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more for me about the discovery that we're doing into interoperability and the integrated care record, because it is concerning to me that people have gone off and done their own thing, because as we know, in terms of safety for our patients, everybody having a different incident of different systems is the least safe way to proceed. So I just wonder if you could give us some assurance around the work that we're doing to look at that. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I add to that, David? Because I've got a related question. I think I probably know the answer to this, Lee. Are the local authorities going for a single supplier, or are there multiple suppliers? And then add on Ruth's points to that question.
Yeah. So yeah, answering the second question first, so you've got the context. There are 18 local authorities that have gone out as part of that group. I think 15 of them have gone with the Mosaic solution. Not the Mosaic solution. Yes, Mosaic, part of the Axis group, their solution. And 3 of them have gone with OLM. So OLM was already in Wales in terms of 3 local authorities using it. So we do have a mixed economy of solutions anyway, so which pays to the importance of the integrated care record. So we do need a successful method of joining up the data across those systems. So we have done discovery on the ICR, the ICR at this point, integrated care record, the integrated care record. We're now calling it the integrated care record rather than the shared care record, because shared care record was constantly confused with the single record and some of the work that NDR were doing. So we've called it integrated care record, and it's very much about joining up the data wherever it sits at and presenting that at the point of care for clinicians and social workers, so they've got the right data. I think it's a critical part of the infrastructure and part of the kind of tripod of services we expected to deliver when we proposed that we would be dealing with a landscape with different solutions across mental health, community health and social care. I don't think we expected to have quite so many solutions. We had hoped to have 3, but we're probably going to end up with around about 6 different solutions in that space. So the problem is the same. We still need to join them up. The integrations are a little bit tougher. So we have a session this afternoon actually with our execs on finalising the project brief associated with that ICR. There is good engagement across all of the health boards and local authorities at the moment. It could always be better. We're still at very much that kind of forming and storming stage, but that is very much an area we are kind of concreting our responsibility for through the kind of governance discussions and the discovery at this point. So yeah, that is in train and off the ground, and we're hoping to provide a business case for that probably by about the end of Q1 in the next financial year.
Okay, thanks, Lee. And Rowan.
Thanks, David, and thank you, Lee. I think it's just important as we have these conversations to remind ourselves that the people behind who are represented in these records are often in really vulnerable places. So it's not all about costs, but I want to just dig into the 3 versus 6 solutions and what that means for the cost consequence. If we put our original business case in on the idea that we would be integrated across 3 systems, and then we're now in a different scenario where there are 6, and that isn't twice the integration cost. It's often the square of the integration cost, because you've got more systems perhaps needing to speak to each other. How well appreciated and how well is the business case able to flex to the consequences of those choices?
Yeah. So we are at that kind of fortunate position where the landscape is becoming much clearer as we produce the OBC for the integrated care element of this. So we have that opportunity to properly size it, and we have also provided the requirements for all of the procurement activities. So ensuring that all of those solutions are kind of API enabled to allow us to get at that data, and that they are submitting at a standard that we would expect in terms of the data standards and format of that. there's always opportunities to tighten that up, but I'm not too concerned about the level of complexity in terms of 3 to 6, because actually when you look at the integrated care record, it's going to need to point and plug into a whole lot of more. So we're talking about dozens, if not 20 plus systems that we will want to access eventually via the ICR. That includes all of the NDR and the national data sets, and possibly systems that we haven't yet concluded are part of that scope. So I think we need to build a set of scalable infrastructure that will allow us to plug into all of these things and present that data in a meaningful way. That said, it also needs to be kept simple. It's a viewer that will present the data in a very simple way, and the wiring, although complex in the background, should be unseen to the user, and certainly unseen to the patient or the citizen. They don't care about any of that. They just want their data presented simply. So I think there is an architectural challenge as we go through that is sizable, and there are opportunities. You've had a long discussion about NDR in the previous session. The more data that is in NDR, the simpler my job gets in terms of surfacing that. So it needs to be that kind of dual approach of, wherever possible, put the data in the NDR, which makes it far easier for us to surface it. But where not possible, we will integrate. So it is very challenging, but also very exciting. It's a game changer in terms of an opportunity here. So we will start small. I think the project scope is going to start small with 2 or 3 use cases and build out from there. But we are thinking about the challenge of the infrastructure right from the outset, so that we're not left with a whole load of rework or scaling that we haven't accounted for.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, Lee. We don't have any more questions on that, so let's move to the next agenda item, which is the National Digital Eye Care Programme, and for that we're going to go to Margaret.
Hi all, thank you. So a brief update on the Eye Care Programme, recent progress and next steps. I know you'll have heard a lot about this, so just briefly, we've completed the rollout of Microsoft 365, which gives optometrists in the community access to the suite of Microsoft products, including email and Teams. Mitigates the risk of information being lost in care settings, reduces time spent converting paper to digital, and puts them in a good position to utilise future developments, such as electronic referrals between primary and secondary care. Now, with the longer term in mind, there was a meeting in the middle of January, 17th of January, which included reps from DHCW, the NHS CDIO, Mike Emery, the Welsh Government Chief Optometric Officer, I'm hoping I'm correctly, and the programme chair. And it was decided in that meeting that the most pragmatic way forward is for Cardiff and Vale to commence a tactical rollout of the Open Eyes solution, essentially an ophthalmology electronic patient record, to health boards. And so it was acknowledged that while this is a short term, it would be of value to patients across Wales if we could take this step, and Welsh Government are going to take that forward, health boards, in support of the activity. Longer term wise, there will be a commercial procurement strategy to identify the options for that longer term solution, and that will need to be worked up and considered, and this will be needed as that Cardiff and Vale contract concludes in January 2020. And of course, it's important to get that longer term solution right for the future. And it was agreed that an options paper, including resources and finances, would be produced by September. So as the essential primary care elements of delivery have been completed, the Microsoft 365 rollout that I mentioned, the next phase of the programme of delivery of the options paper will be taken forward by our planned care programme team. So just a thanks really to Alison, our digital eye care programme, in work she's done. It's been a challenging programme, but we think we found a pragmatic way forward, enable a robust future model to be developed and procured for the future and longer term.
Okay, thank you for that summary. Any questions on the eye care programme? So just for clarity, Margaret, the paper's gone forward, but we're basically waiting on Welsh Government to determine whether we can fund this to the extent that we've outlined in our options paper. Is that correct?
And that a longer term really. Oh, go on, Red.
Yeah. Okay. Ridian.
Sorry, I wasn't going to answer that question.
Oh, you would. Sorry, I thought you were jumping in to answer. So essentially, in the first instance, it's just that tactical piece with Cardiff and Vale, and that we do need to just agree on options, and that's been re-engineered really, or engineered this year with the plan programme team in Ivan's area. Yeah. Sorry, Rid.
Okay. Sorry, Ridian, come in if you want, and then I'll go to Simon.
So a couple of things. First one is that this was led at a local health board level, and and we know that there have been some difficulties with the programme, and they've been previously discussed. Is there a lessons learnt about how one starts a programme with the good intention of providing safer care everywhere, but done in a locality where the pathways may be different to somewhere else, and therefore scalability. This goes back again to our All Wales approach, equity of care everywhere, ensuring all patients have an equal opportunity of having the best outcomes, and that all care, wherever it is done, is collected, stored, and shared. So, has there been a review of where we've got to as a programme? Do you know? Maybe it's a bit unfair me saying that to you, given you've just arrived in the organisation.
That's okay. I would need to double check exactly to give an honest answer. Ivan, I don't know if you've got more clarity on that than me without dropping you in.
Margaret, should I come in on that just to say, I'm trying to think of the timelines, but well over 6 months ago now, the audit committee through Marion instigated a formal internal audit, 2 internal audits into the iCare programme, one around DHCW's readiness to take it forward and our work since transfer to us. The second one was very much around the procurement where we've got to today. So one of the recommendations or comments, I don't know if it was a formal recommendation within the internal audit report, was around consideration of where national digital programs sit, and if they're being led by an individual health board, do they have the capacity, etc., to roll out at a national level. So I think there was some useful information within that internal audit report, but as audit committee members will know, the scope of the audit was relatively constrained to the procurement element. So I know that through that committee there were lots of questions when that report was received that were probably broader than the scope of the audit. So there is probably something to do to expand on that to look more at the programme as a whole rather than just the procurement element, which is what the second audit really focused on.
Thank you, Chris. If I could just come back on that, Chair. So this programme was established a long time ago. Vaughan Gethin was involved and agreed for it to go forward. The personnel who were instigated the programme in terms of senior leadership across Wales have retired. I'm concerned that there may be a lack of organisational memory on what mistakes may have been made, and I wouldn't want us to make them again. And I would like to know that we've got a strong assurance that the next time we procure and deliver, we do it in a way that is scalable across Wales. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for that, Ridian. Simon.
Yeah, just before I ask the question I was going to ask, just pick up on one thing you mentioned there, Ridian, because we have to be so careful of language that we use. And when we say we procure, we didn't procure. So I think you're talking about procurement in general going forward, but I wouldn't want the record to show that that we were the organisation procuring the Open Eyes system. Margaret, my question is, and apologies if you said this and I missed it, because my understanding is that the original money allocated for the programme is, if not exhausted, very close to being exhausted. Does that mean that the Welsh Government have made available resources to either Cardiff or the health boards for the rollout of Open Eyes as you described it, or is that something that is still in consideration?
I would say, Simon, I'm not. Oh, Leah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can come in.
Thank
So
you.
there was an allocation to the original Cardiff programme of work for the productionisation of a solution that would allow all health boards to adopt it. That money has essentially been exhausted now. So we have put, we are revising a business case going forward, saying there needs to be a new business case if if we are to be responsible for implementing this across the other health boards. So that is a consideration. At the moment, there is no more funding for that activity.
Sorry, can I come back then, David? Because
Yeah,
I'm really keen that I'm a very simple bear, and that I get my head around this. I thought what you described, Margaret, is that it would be Cardiff and Vale who would be rolling it out across the health boards. But what you said, Lee, is that we would be putting together a business case. So can I just get it clear in my head who is going to be responsible? Which organisation is going to be responsible for taking forward Open Eyes from this point on? Is it us, or is it Cardiff and Vale, or is it us and Cardiff and Vale?
So, Margaret,
I can start and you can jump in if you need to. So as I understand it, Cardiff and Vale are taking forward that short-term option. They have a contract that concludes in January 2027, and Welsh Government then contacting health boards in support of it is how it's been described to me, to see what can be. But the longer term really is about that new business case that we would work up over this coming year to be completed in September, and that's where the future funding would be. Lee, I don't know if you want to put any further clarity into that.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's my understanding. So Cardiff and Vale had to, get those extensions in place to support their current system. But any scaling of that across health boards requires a new business case, and obviously within that business case, who is going to manage and deploy that would be set out.
Okay, Ruth, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, and I don't want to labour the point, but similarly simple as Simon is, I think. The wording in the update says that Welsh Government suggested that Cardiff and Vale should also implement this to optometrists across Wales. That seems like quite loose language to me, because as we know, a suggestion is just that, a suggestion, and there's no actual requirement on that to happen. So I guess what assurances do we have that something is going to be rolled out in that short term across Wales and is going to be used? Because if we're just operating on this being a suggestion, there's obviously nothing we can do about that. But in terms of governance and the way forward, it doesn't sound like a fantastic solution for the patients.
I think I would agree. I think we need that absolute clarity from Welsh Government about who is doing what, and if we are to deliver something on behalf of the health boards, then how is that going to be funded? Which again would be a response to the business case, I think.
Yeah, thank you, because it puts us in a different position, doesn't it? If something is being rolled out on an interim basis and we then follow that with a full business case and a full solution, that's very different to us following nothing or patchwork.
And I think there's possibly some difference of opinion in terms of the scalability and extensibility of the solution in Cardiff, and we weren't prepared to take that on and deliver it. We wanted to take what they're learning and the product, but redeploy it in a way that we felt was scalable. Without that support, then I think it's up to Cardiff on how they extend what they've got.
Okay. Fine, thanks, Lee. In the interest of time, suggest we move on to the next update, which is from Michelle, and it's the Digital Maternity Cymru report.
From myself, David. So I'll.
Oh, is it? Oh,
I'm
right.
leading
Sorry.
this one. Yeah, no, it does say Michelle on the agenda, so you're absolutely right.
Okay.
But Michelle and I are tag teaming, so
okay, that's fine.
So
that's
yeah,
fine.
so we'll work at the next few programs out between us. So the Digital Maternity Cymru program is currently in a grey, not assessed RAG status, and that is because the procurement process was terminated very soon after the last program's delivery committee. The date at which the program board made that decision was a few days after the program's delivery committee, actually, but that was communicated back to the market before Christmas. There are a number of reasons why that procurement failed, which are handled within the program and have got a commercial sensitivity around them. Then the next steps for the program are to consider and to reflect on why the procurement failed, and also what are the future options for the national program. And we've engaged some external independent support to come in and support us on that. We're working through that progress. In fact, we're meeting this afternoon with the reviewer, and hoping to have a document which we'll be able to use to inform our conversations with Welsh Government. Welsh Government has also written to health boards twice, once in November and once, I think, well, a few days ago, earlier this week, or the end of last week, around its expectations for the digital maternity company. So I'm just going to pause for assurance to the board. So because our role is to oversee the delivery of the national program, and the national program has failed, and there are a number of reasons for that. The assurance that I want to give to the board is that the program, as a program, from program delivery and from a program governance perspective, has been run in an entirely regular and proper way. And in particular, I want to call out the effort within the program board to apply lessons learned at the end of 2023. So the program was established to set up a digital maternity system across Wales. That was the program objective. It did that based on a discovery report. And during 2023, there was no formal outlined business case. There was no formal commitment from health boards. There was a set of assumptions about, that if the program purchased on behalf of all a system, then that would be implemented and deployed across health organisations. The lessons that we were learning at that time in 23 from the Welsh intensive care system and from a review of the diagnostics programme led the programme to come to the view that, reflecting on those lessons learned, we needed more certainty and more formality around the commitments from health boards in order to provide more confidence and assurance around the ability to work these things through. And what that led to was first the development of an OBC, and secondly, a procurement strategy that involved going to market for a single supplier framework. Those documents, I think all recognise that the documents were well drafted, well argued, and had thoroughly engaged with stakeholders across Wales and also in other markets, particularly Scotland, who had recently implemented maternity across Scotland. Even so, that process exposed that health boards were not able to support the collective approach in that programme. So there's a fundamental tension that the Welsh Government had set an objective and established a national collaborative programme for us to deliver. But as we hardened up the collaboration expectations, health boards were finding that very difficult to sign up to. And we managed that through the programme governance, went to market. There was a high degree of flexibility built into the procurement framework at the request of Welsh Government and health boards. And the procurement framework ultimately failed. And Welsh Government has now, it's maintaining the objective of a digital maternity system across Wales, but it is setting that expectation on health boards to work independently. So it is intending to fund health boards directly, to require health boards to procure themselves from a common framework, and then to each individually implement a maternity system that delivers a maternity system across Wales through compliance with standards for data and for configurations, and through data sharing requirements. And the Welsh Government has described a role for the national programme in doing that. So the options look at what would be the future role for the national programme in relation to local programmes, given that funding won't be running through the national programme anymore, and it is not a single collaborative decision mechanism, and in fact will be more like the EPMA situation, where again health boards are individually funded for EPMA implementations, and then there's a national programme that tries to deliver sharing of knowledge, coordination, and compliance with common standards, particularly around data exchange. So we're into a new phase. While we're working our way through that phase, and until Welsh Government confirms what is its preferred option, and we agree with it, how will the national programme be constituted? What will its revised scope be? What's the funding requirement? What's the relationship between it and several local programs? We're maintaining that grey status. So I just wanted to rehearse that history, because I think it's part of the role here. I mean, members are very, very interested in how we learn lessons and how we then apply the lessons that we have learned. I feel that the maternity program has done that very sincerely and transparently and openly in a very regular and proper way, using the general frameworks that we have. Even then, the procurement has failed. And part of the review is, are those for reasons specific to maternity and the market in maternity, and where different organizations were at that point in time on maternity implementations, or is that something that has a wider application that we need to think about and then roll back into the way that we design programs to succeed in future, which a couple of people have mentioned earlier. So I hope that was useful on the maternity program, and a kind of a slightly broader reflection drawing on the conversation around eye care as well.
Okay, got quite a few hands up, so let's go to Rowan first.
So Ivan, at some level, I'm not sure that it is useful, because we hear variations of this over and over again, and I suppose that's the point you're making. And I actually want to commend Michelle, because Michelle, I have seen you kind of in various procurement cycles try and hold the line on this. If I was a citizen who's in Wales, I'd be exasperated by this, because that's what we all get up and go to work for in the NHS. I think all of us, to try and, to build, deploy, operate a coherent service. And it just feels that however the ambition is described, the organisations, so not DHCW in isolation, as Simon quite rightly pointed out, quite often we're not procuring services. We just don't seem to have a common way of making this work. And I think the variable that doesn't get described in these kind of recapitulations of how it happened and the various parties is time, because these conversations go on over years, and the cost involved in resourcing those conversations to come to something that is just doesn't get implemented is I think really disappointing, and I'm sure that everyone feels that. So I think there is a real need to look across a whole slew of procurements that we have had sight of in digital, and ask ourselves, how do we make this work better? Because it just isn't working at the moment, and that's also recognizing we have to work within all of the public service governance guidelines and everything else that Michelle responds to. So I just wanted to kind of voice that frustration on behalf of everyone.
Yeah, me too, Rowan. Before I ask you to respond, if you are, can I bring in Simon?
Yeah, I mean, if we are being asked to hold the ring on standards and developing standards in terms of the interoperability of systems across Wales, but we don't have the ability to mandate those standards because that's not within our gift, is there something there, or is there going to be something in place that from the Welsh Government that will be mandating the standards that we develop with the wider system? Because my concern would be that we'll do an awful lot of engagement and we'll do an awful lot of work with all the health boards in developing standards, but where's the certainty that those standards will be applied now and in the hereafter?
Even?
Shall I come back on the two of those, David?
Yes, please.
So yeah, as you know, I always try to have a balanced view and to be glass half full, and it's it can be easy to slip in to the perception that everything is going wrong everywhere, because it's the things that are going wrong that get the most airtime at all of our management meetings and all of our assurance meetings, and here at the at the Programs Delivery Committee. Things that are going well don't get that level of attention because they're going well. So I don't think it's the case that all of our procurements are in this kind of trouble. There are lots of procurements that work very well, and sometimes I think we go to market very effectively in a collective way. And there are some programs that work their way through, very effectively, and particularly in times of crisis and challenge, the system absolutely comes together. I think there's a whole book about the NHS being a super fragile organization. So when you compress it through a crisis, it just sticks together, and that's how it gets through each challenge, one after the other. But there is a lot to learn, and you learn a lot more from things going wrong than you do from things going right. And I think the key question is: do they each go wrong for their own reasons, or are there different? And are there some underlying reasons that are common that we can address and resolve that would lift all the boats? And that's part of how we need to bring together all of these lessons learned.
I appreciate that, Ivan. I just think the pandemic is the poster child in the fragile organisation being but the consequence on our people. From relying on that is one that we have to kind of reflect on, really.
Not to get ahead of Michelle, but I think there's been some effective, tight collaborative working and very constructive collaborative working under pressure in the diagnostics programs as well over the last couple of years, for example. So it's not. I agree. There's a temptation to always go back to 2020. On data standards, there is a mechanism. So we is an interesting word we've used quite a bit. So DHCW has got a key role in data standards across Wales. We have a data standards team. We develop and lead consultation on new data standards through the data standards change notice mechanism. Those are then approved through the Welsh Informatics Standards Board, which is sponsored by Welsh Government, and then those data standards, when published, and we publish them on behalf of Welsh Government, they have the force of a Welsh Health Circular. They in theory are mandated standards throughout the system in the same way that a Welsh Health Circular would be a mandated requirement across the system. And you could then say, well, we don't need a national program on top of that in order to enforce compliance with standards, just publish the DSCNs and we're done. And so the question for the future of the program is that going to be enough? And particularly around the configuration standards, because those relate to data standards specifically, does it need a national program as effectively additional cover or additional insurance or additional energy behind compliance with standards? And this is something that we've addressed in the shared medicines record space, for example. So DHCW, we in data standards is a very clearly defined role, well established, about 15 years. I think that arrangement has been in place. DHCW, we as the host organization for a national program, has got a different set of accountabilities and a different authority within the system.
Perhaps just one observation, if I may, David, very, very brief, in terms of, I think Rhaglen referred earlier to a Welsh Health Circular that mandated the use of the NHS number, and we are where we are.
Yep.
Okay, can I, before I bring in Chris and Rhaglen, just observe that we've spent the allocated time on this section and we've still got 7 reports to go, so we do need to speed up if we're going to get some lunch today. Chris.
Thanks, David. Yeah, just a quick point on the digital maternity Cymru update, and appreciating the status is grey. I think there is a bit of work to really decipher what DHCW's role is.
Yeah.
And therefore what the committee's role is, because we've just reviewed our terms of reference around overseeing DHCW-led national programs. So I think not to do here and now, but I think perhaps we just, as we find out more and understand more what our role is, what the role of this committee is in overseeing the program.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Rhaglen.
Thanks, David. I will try and be brief, but I'm afraid that may not be easy on this particular topic, which is quite close to my heart. And I say that because as a urologist, I often deal with the trauma related to pregnancy and have done over the last 20 years. And so let's start by thanking our team internally for the fantastic effort they've got to collect evidence from across the world as to how you can make maternity care safer by using digital systems. And the conclusion from those other nations is the information must be available at the point of care. My concern, and I would like it noted, is that a fragmented system where everyone has their own version of vanilla ice cream means that the vanilla isn't vanilla. For the organisation, I'm concerned that we may appear a lame duck here, as we don't have a mechanism to control the behaviours of organisations which aren't under our control. So I urge us to consider whether or not we should actually be stating that it's a national programme, given that on all appearances it would appear that it isn't national. Yes, we can facilitate the setting of standards, and I've made comments on standards before, but Welsh Government issue them, and Welsh Government direct the use of them. So it's disappointing that we haven't achieved the objective of a single instance, and I say we, the system, of a single instance, ensuring that the mother has access to her record wherever she goes, and that the clinicians who might treat her, and these aren't all obstetricians, have access to the information to provide the mother with a risk assessment and the best outcome possible. So we provided our advice, Chair. That is all we can do as an organisation.
Thanks for that summary, Rydian. And I think it was worth spending the amount of time we have spent on this topic, because it's given us clarity on a number of issues. But we do need to move on. I've got Welsh Intensive Care Information System next. Is that you or Michelle?
Next three are for Michelle.
Right. Okay. Cool.
I will take on board your steer, David, and I will try and run through them swiftly, because we've talked about these quite a lot in previous committees, but obviously happy to take questions from members. So if we start with Wiki, so that's the intensive care. So the system, the national programme was established to put a digital system into our adult critical care services across Wales. So again, this one is grey, not assessed at this point because of the independent review that was commissioned by Welsh Government back last year. The review actually concluded around about September time, and we've been working with the Welsh Government digital team and the NHS executive in terms of how we take that forward. There is actually a workshop tomorrow, which is a really positive development. I think now all of the health boards are attending, and the plan is to discuss the main conclusions in the review and the key, some of the key aspects arising with a view to reaching consensus between the health boards in terms of how we can take this forward. So the supplier will also be attending that event, and we've spent quite a lot of time, as you'll be aware. DHCW is the contracting authority, so we've spent a lot of time working with the supplier in the intervening period. So I am hopeful that tomorrow at a strategic level we will be able to achieve alignment, and then there is obviously more detailed work to be done in a number of workshops, again working very closely with our health board colleagues to understand the changes that would need to be made to the solution in order for it to be safely deployed across Wales. And the agreement that we have with Welsh Government colleagues is that we will do this initial stage of work, a proposal will be developed, and that will be shared with Welsh Government, and then a firm decision will be made as to whether we're in a position to move forward. And I anticipate, we were hoping to do that by the end of March. It's taken a little bit longer than we'd hoped, I think, to get these workshops scheduled, but I'm anticipating that by May we should be in a position to make a firm decision in terms of the future direction for WCIS.
Great, thank you for that concise update. Rydian.
Thank you, Michelle. Could you just confirm whether or not there is a clinical lead from the ICU community on this programme?
So currently no, Rydian, that's correct. So we had a very good clinical lead up to towards the end of the last calendar year. He's actually decided to stand down from the programme. So the NHS executive are looking at options in terms of who would be appropriate to pick that up. It's a key role and really important. I'm sure that's why you're calling it out, Rydian, to lead the engagement with the other clinicians involved in the programme. So it is an area that we need to be addressed as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Shall I move on, David?
Yes, please.
So I'm moving. I think RIS was next, so the radiology. So again, this is principally replacing the radiology information system and the PACS. So the image system across Wales. So big project, and again, a single supplier, single solution across the whole of Wales. So we are fast approaching the first planned go live date. So I'm really pleased to say this is a difficult program. It's a significant solution, but really good progress being made. And Ivan mentioned earlier about really good collaborative working with health boards. And we've also invested quite a bit of time with the supplier, so we meet with him on a regular basis. In fact, our chief exec is involved in those meetings so that we're setting that strategic context and make sure that we've got the right level of input. I think, picking up on a point that was made earlier, I can't help myself, we are able to do that because we're acting as a whole country. So we get the attention of the supplier because we're acting as a whole country. And that, to Rowan's point, is really important leverage, I think, for Wales in terms of our ability to do that. So quite a bit of work to be done. Really pleased to say Public Health Wales agreed yesterday that they would go live on the 11th of February. So that's next week. So they're ready to go. This is the first time that they will have their own RISP solution. So they're having what they call a soft go live. So they'll start to add appointments into the system ahead of the full use of the solution, which they anticipate will be about a month later. Powys also on track to go live in early April. And then I'm sure the other two wouldn't mind. The big initial go live, if you like, is up in the north, so up in BCU. Significant programme of work in BCU because they are replacing the RISP, but they are also bringing together the 3 services that operate across their key geographical areas into one service. So they're actually, as quite a significant transformation in addition to implementing a digital solution. There are some challenges up in BCU, and they have flagged some issues very recently. There was a meeting with the supplier last week to really get into the detail of those and to make sure that we've got a clear way forward. Their date that they are proposing to go live is the 16th of May. So obviously there's a lot of close working now, and the national programme team are very much involved in that in supporting BCU. Contracts are held by the health boards with regard to the RISP, but it's a kind of collaborative approach to take them forward. Probably the other thing to call out, and I think it is mentioned in the report, finances on RISP. So happy to say that the indication from Welsh Government is that we will get the funding that we need to continue with the RISP programme next year. So that's obviously important. When dates move in terms of go live, that can create some problems if dates move across financial years. And we had a little bit of that. So BCU was originally in this financial year. They moved to next financial year. So that has to be managed with Welsh Government. And we've had some other queries in terms of the financial position recently that we're working through with Welsh Government and finance colleagues in all of the health boards.
Okay, thank you for that summary. Good to hear that we've got some go lives coming up soon. Rhaglenni.
Sorry to be dominating the airwaves, but there are some concerns here that I need to just explore, please. This is a radiology system, but the consumers of the radiology system include those who request radiology and those who receipt and view the images once they're reported. So my 2 concerns that I'd like on record, please. One is the use of the All Wales electronic test requesting for radiology, an application that is well established across most organisations, and the stats are improving. This is a standardised, safe way, coded, auditable, recorded within the record that allows one to understand what has been requested. The second one is that the current supplier provides a 2-click solution into an application to view the record, the imaging. That's called mobility. I'm yet to see the new provider's solution, and I think we must ensure that we make it as easy as possible for the clinicians who rely on viewing the imaging, the ability to 2-click into it. It would be detrimental if they had to open a separate application, then search with demographics, and we would find ourselves in an unsafe or a less safe situation than we currently are.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Yep, thank you. And Rhaglenni has flagged those issues with the programme, and those are issues that we are very much working on. David, thanks. Shall I run into LIMS quickly?
Yes, please.
So I'm doing our big programmes quickly. This is the Laboratory Information Management System. just a brief reminder, we do remind ourselves in 2023, in fact, we took on this programme from the collaborative. We also terminated the contract with the supplier who have been appointed. So hopefully board member colleagues will be familiar with that. I won't necessarily go into all the detail of that. But what it did mean is that we compressed what would have been a 4-year programme into 2 years. And I think we're seeing some of the consequences of that now. There's a significant amount of progress has been made with this programme. And again, a lot of commitment from the health boards and from the central team, because we understand the benefits of a single limb. So we already have a single limbs in Wales. We're deploying a new single limbs. We're working with the same supplier, but it is a completely new solution. So it's their next generation product that we're rolling out. So a couple of things, because of the timescales, I think all of the functionality changes, if you like, that the health boards would have liked to see in the solution are not necessarily in the solution currently. So we have the principle of we need a core solution that's safe, focus on safety, that can be deployed. There will be further enhancements to the software as we move forward, and a few of us met with, had a really good strategic session with the supplier last week, and that is very much the plan. So we will go live, and then there will be an ongoing iterative process of adding enhancements to the solution. And I think that's need to be really clear about that. There's also a significant amount of testing because of the critical nature of the service that the LIMS provides. There's a lot of testing. Testing has been apportioned or shared between the health boards, so quite a good approach in terms of how we can share that resource, but nevertheless it's a significant amount of testing resource with laboratory staff who are already under quite a lot of pressure. So that is where some of the tension comes from the health boards, and we are in discussion. In fact, we have a board now next Tuesday about how far we are. We've progressed with the user acceptance testing, whether we will be in a position, we feel confidently, to draw a line under that and to move forward with the go live procedure. It is a discussion piece at the moment. We have put forward a mitigation plan to the health boards, which is about focusing the testing really around the initial go live sites. So Swansea Bay and Howth will go live together. And they are first, and the reason they're going together is because they are bringing their lab services together, which the new system allows them to do. So really, again, a transformation program for them. So that's a really live discussion, to be honest, with the board at the moment. And obviously the key priority, I have a fantastic, I'll name him, Programme Oversight Chair on LIMS, Peter Carr, who's the Exec Director of Therapies in an Iron Bevan, and he's very clear. You know, he runs a really, really good board. That we won't go if it's not safe. We won't go live. We all understand that, but provided that it is safe and we are confident, it's important that we move forward. Because again, the issue that we will be discussing is we have a hard backstop, which is why one of the reasons we made the difficult decision about termination in 2023. That DHCW runs the current service. We have a backstop date of December 2025. To have everybody transitioned onto the new service, there are quite significant financial implications if we need to run that into 2026. It's not impossible. So there is still contingency, but there are financial implications. So those are the kind of discussions that we're having in the board at the moment about how we get that balance right. But the current plan is that Swansea Bay and Howth would go live at the beginning of May. So relatively close. Obviously, we need to make sure that they are comfortable to move forward on that basis.
Thanks, Michelle. Really good to see that the programme has moved forward, even with the compressed timescales. There's obviously going to be some tension in the system, but we are making good progress. Can't see any hands up, so can I just move on to the last few items? Even I think you're down to cover these. We do only have slightly under 20 minutes left, and we still have Chris going to do a bit of a risk update. So if you could be as brief as possible on these, that would be helpful.
I will indeed. Thank you very much, Chair. So digital medicines first. Digital medicines is two programs or two sub-programs and two projects. The two larger programs are the EPS, Primary Care Electronic Prescribing Service, that is in rollout phase. The rollout is linked to the speed at which practices migrate from SEGDIM to EMIS. There's some uncertainty around that, given the situation with INPS, the provider of the SEGDIM service or solution. but we still have a confidence of meeting the timetable for the program. There are different ways we might reach that, but there's some uncertainty, which I think is reflected in the less than green rating. So we've got a reasonable confidence rather than a absolute confidence. And that is making good progress. I just want to put in context the scale of the change, right? So it says in the report 600,000 prescriptions have been sent digitally. In Wales, that's around 3 days worth of all prescriptions in primary care. So the numbers do sound quite big, but let's call it the target addressable market is gigantic. But so therefore is the efficiency of removing all of that paper, because every one of those moves on paper with a wet signature at the moment. So they're big opportunities, a very important program for us, but on track and on plan. EPMA, we run a coordination of the local EPMA programs. 2 more health boards have selected their preferred suppliers. So we're in a position now where Cardiff and Cwmtaf and Betsy have previously confirmed their suppliers, and Hywel Dda and Erin Bevan have confirmed, and I think have announced. I'm not 100% sure whether they've announced. And Swansea already had an EPMA supplier from a previous Pathfinder they had. So we're making good progress across Wales. The amber green relates to some of those suppliers, and the contracts that are managed by the health boards have some work to do to be able to meet the standards and to integrate properly with the shared medicines record. So there's some uncertainty in that, but overall, again, we are still on track. And the 2 other smaller projects are patient access, which means prescription features in the app. So they're making good progress and being picked up within the app program, and the shared medicines record project that is up and running has some work just to finish off, and is looking at what is sort of project closure and transition into a live business as usual type product model will be over the coming months. So I'll pause there on digital medicines in case any questions or comments. Nope. If so, I'll move on to cancer. So the cancer informatics program is really, in fact, the CANISC switch off program. That's the focus of this this program has been replicating the functionality of the legacy CANISC product in Welsh Clinical Portal and in other places. It is we're intending to turn CANISC off as a live in-use service at the end of March. And we're on track to do that. As usual, there are lots of challenges, even though we have a few weeks to go around user acceptance testing and complete sign-off and all the other assurance and the testing that we do. The reason this is red amber is because the red amber is a delivery confidence against the previous timetable, and the 31st of March represents a slippage from what we'd originally planned, but we are now on track for the 31st of March. The CANISC decommissioning program, or the CANISC closure program, will then close. So we're expecting to close this program. There's a backlog of cancer features to develop, and a lot of work to do there, but we'll be managing that through a product team, through product approach, in the way that we develop other features in the Welsh Clinical Portal. And there are lots of features there. So one of the biggest tasks there is to marshal all of those, to prioritize and sequence them, because we have been prioritizing the very complex task of decommissioning CANISC in preference to developing new features which are desirable for clinicians. And so we'll move on to that as soon as CANISC is turned off. We're currently on track to do that, even though, and I just wanted to explain the context and the reason for the amber red rating, even though we are on track on the timetable that we're now working to. I shall pause there in case anybody wants to come in with any comments. Rowan.
Just one. That's great to hear. CANISC, has a very obsolete architecture, and this represents a really strong foundation, I feel, for delivering better oncology care, and look forward to kind of seeing the team put onto positive stuff in terms of enhancing features available to oncologists across Wales. So thank you. That's a great update.
Thank you. I might as well just comment. This is another example of the technical debt that is concealed within our system. It is proven to be very complicated, much harder than we'd originally anticipated, for a whole host of reasons. And we do have all of this technical debt loaded up over the last 2 decades or more in our system. Finally, some happier news, I suppose, in that context, which is the NHS Wales app. So the NHS Wales app, I'm sure there is some technical debt hidden in it, but the NHS Wales app is built on a modern platform. It's built using agile methodologies and open architecture, all on cloud, using modern software practice throughout, and is making good progress against the delivery increments that it has. So it's on track throughout this year. The reasonable confidence rating for the NHS Wales app is to do with confirming the funding requirement for 25-26 and an uncertainty across the longer runway. The business case was shared with Welsh Government in May of 2024. Lots of discussions with officials, and in the new year, those discussions have been directly with the minister. Simon and I met with the minister on was it Monday this week or last Monday this week, where she wanted to personally review the features roadmap and some of the options for the NHS Wales app in a kind of a gold, silver, and bronze. What are my choices here? Because the government wants us to move as quickly as we're able to in terms of rolling out features into the app, but features cost money, and there's no magic money tree, as I think somebody once said. So we're amber green. I think the one other thing that I want to call out is that we've made good progress with insourcing some of the work that we have. So we've used an external supplier, Kainos, for all of our development on the NHS Wales app thus far. And we're building an internal team to take on that role from Kainos. That both gives us more control, but it also gives us a more cost-efficient base to work on. We're doing that carefully. This is a mission-critical, public-facing app, which is really important for DHW and for NHS Wales as a whole. The final thing which I'd mentioned was that one of the key things that the programme was seeking to resolve, working closely with Welsh Government, was GPs supporting the Welsh Identity Verification Service, which is the offline mechanism for securing an NHS login account. We wanted to replicate what was in England and make it as similar to what we already have for My Health Online as possible. GP support for that has been confirmed in the new GMS contract, in the new GP contract, at the on the 31st of January. So that would be end of last week. That is really welcome news. So we will look now how do we operationalize WIVs, and that was a key point for us in order to address digital inclusion and to make sure that everybody in Wales is able to get an NHS login account and therefore to use the app, including people who don't have a photo ID, driving license or passport, which was previously a requirement. So that is really welcome news, and we're working closely with government on accelerating now the next steps.
Okay, thanks, Evan. Simon, you did hand up briefly. Did you want to come in?
I just thought Ivan was going to forget mentioning the WIV stuff, which is the big news of the year so far in respect to the app.
Okay, great. You managed to remember that. Excellent. Okay, Evan, is there anything from the other projects and programmes that needs to be escalated, or can we close out this section of the agenda?
No, I think we're complete on this section. So just to remind people, we report routinely on all of the major programs, no matter their red, amber, green confidence. But for other programs and projects that we run, we review them at our management board internally, and then they would be reported here if any of them are in a red status, together with a commentary on the route to recovery from a red status. Currently, nothing on the red status. In the front of the pack, the slide deck that you have, there's just a portfolio dashboard of what we have in that longer tail of other programs. So we've got a mix there of greens and amber greens and amber reds, but nothing red.
Okay, great. Fine. So we've closed out section 5 of the agenda. Oh, no, we haven't. Sorry, the 5.2, which is the corporate risk register. So we'll hand over to Chris. Chris, I know you can be slightly brief on this. We would like to try and finish just after 1 o'clock if that's possible. But if you need to take the time, please do.
Thanks, Chair. No, I think we'll be fine to aim for that, because I think a number of the risks have been covered. We deliberately put this after the dashboard because a number are covered. I just wanted to start actually with just highlighting some opportunities and threats from the discussion so far through the committee, because I think that's very much what the risk register is all about. So the importance of data and safe and secure access to data has come up, and obviously all the work on the NDR is very important from an opportunity perspective. The importance of architecture highlighted, and the long-term impacts of decisions on architecture to be aware of. we're currently working. Our number one priority is target national architecture. Reliance on commercial products and relations with suppliers, that's come up a lot today, and there's a big focus through the engagement team on commercial supplier engagement. Governance and ambiguity of DHEW's role in some of our major programs. The DDAC governance review has just been published. And then program funding and potentially diluting some of the funding and the risk that brings to delivery and expectation. And Rowan again mentioned the comms on value of digital, looking through the lens of an opportunity. And then finally, gaps in program chairs. And Michelle mentioned the importance of us having a strong program chair and where that has been the case, the difference that's made. So I thought it'd be helpful just to start with that. In terms of the corporate risk register, Chair, there are 3 risks currently assigned to this committee. The intensive care risk, I'm not going to propose we cover. I think Michelle covered earlier, and we might be able to go into a bit more detail in the closed session. The Welsh language scheme compliance as it relates to the bilingual login to the app, we had an update at board, so I wasn't going to cover that unless there are further questions. The digital eye care service delivery, I just wanted to pause on this briefly. I know we discussed it. We are looking at whether this comes off the DHW corporate risk register in line with the grey status and the potential move to Cardiff and Vale. I think that would be appropriate, and so there might be movement on this for the next committee meeting. That's imminent, but depending on how discussions and next steps pan out with Welsh Government, that one might change. The next one I just wanted to mention was the Canis Phase 2 risk. That is remaining, discussed this actually with Ridian yesterday and got a steer, is remaining as is for now, but we're under close review with that one clearly as the decommissioning progresses, and I guess defining what decommissioning is and when the risk is at a level that we feel the risk can be reduced down and or removed. The last thing I wanted to mention from a risk perspective, which is something Ivan started with, was just the accountability, the requirement for an accountability officer to be submitted to Welsh Government by the 14th of February, so that's next week. Clearly, we've got some indicative planning figures for our programmes that we're working to next year, but we haven't had anything formal in terms of writing that's been approved by the Minister in terms of funding, so that might impact that, and that clearly would be a potential risk for a number of our programmes, but we will manage that over the next week and when we get an understanding as whether that letter is required. David, I'm going to assume the changes in terms of risk scores have been noted by the committee and stop there, but happy to take any questions.
Right. Okay. Any questions for Chris? No, Chris, thank you for the summary of pulling out things that have come up during the committee meeting. That's really helpful. And as you said, we've covered most of the things that are on the risk register one way or another through the programme update. So if there's no further questions for Chris, that leaves me to close out the meeting then, with the public meeting at least. Is there any other business? I've not been notified of any in advance, so just pause just to see if anybody wants to raise anything. Okay, I can't see anything. With regards to the highlight report, I've got quite a few things that I've noted during the course of the meeting. In the interest of time, I won't go through them, but I'll work with Ivan and the governance team just to make sure we've captured all of those for me to surface at the next SHA board meeting. I'll now bring this meeting to a close. Our next meeting is on the 1st of May next year. Next financial year, sorry. We're still in 2025, so 1st of May 2025. Thank you for getting us back on track, even and Chris towards the end. But where we did spend the time, I felt it was quality time on things that were important. So I think on balance, we've done a good job today. So I'll bring this meeting to a close and we'll resume in 15 minutes for the private session. Okay. Take care. Bye.